Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football by Ben. Today, I'll be talking about my Week 13 quarterback and running back rankings. Tomorrow, I'll be doing my wide receiver and tight end rankings. Alright, so there's a football game going on today, Wednesday, the 2nd. Happy birthday to Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, my buddy Ross. Happy birthday. So, I'll be doing my quarterback ranking right now. And so for my quarterback one this week, I have Patrick Mahomes, who's going up against the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos have not been very good against quarterbacks, and Taysom Hill didn't have a very good game last week, but I mean, he's not truly a starting quarterback, in my opinion. He's more of a runner, and so he had 2 rushing touchdowns, which did help his fantasy day a lot, but I mean, I don't think Taysom Hill's a great quarterback or anything. I think he's fantasy solid, but I don't know if he's a good throwing quarterback. Where Patrick Mahomes is a very good throwing quarterback, and last week Patrick Mahomes had a phenomenal game, even just in the first half. I mean, he was already a top 2 scoring quarterback with it just within the first half. And so I have Patrick Mahomes at number 2 or at number 1 this week. I expect him to finish as a top quarterback this week in fantasy. At number 2, I have Russell Wilson against the Giants. Giants have not been very good against quarterbacks this year. They have a shutdown corner in James Bradbury, and I think he's a pretty good corner this year. But I do think that Darius Slay is a pretty good corner, and DK Metcalf made him look really bad last week. And, I mean, Carson ran for a touchdown, and the Eagles' defense is pretty solid, to be honest. And I feel like the Seahawks kind of just, got to, the goal line and then didn't score. So then that hurt Russell Wilson because I don't think that, or they weren't even, considering really throwing the ball a whole lot. But I do think that DK Metcalf will have a big game this week, so then that'll help Russell Wilson this week. And I think Tyler Lockett will hopefully get back on track. So I have Russell Wilson at 2 against the Giants. And I trust DK Metcalf against James Bradbury any week. At number 3, I have Aaron Rodgers, who's going up against the Eagles. So the Eagles have been a really good defense. They just haven't had help on the offensive side. And so I do think this is a pretty tough defense, but Aaron Rodgers is playing out of his mind. He's a top 5 scoring quarterback every week. He's been a beast. Aaron Rodgers is someone you're not sitting. I have Aaron Rodgers at 3 this week. At number 4, I have Lamar Jackson going against the Browns. Browns secondary is not very good, and this is hoping that Lamar Jackson is back from COVID protocol and stuff. I don't know if he had it, but I know that he's on the COVID reserve list, so he probably did have it. I do think that this is going to be a big game for Lamar Jackson if he plays. And so I do think that Lamar Jackson is a top 5 scoring quarterback this week, so I'm at number 4. At number 5, I have Justin Herbert, who's going up against the Patriots. Like I've always said, the Patriots have a really tough defense. They've always had a pretty tough defense. And they made Kyler Murray last week look really bad. Scored 7 fantasy points. But that's also because Kenyan Drake had 2 rushing touchdowns, where normally Kyler Murray steals one of them, or if not both. And he didn't have a rushing touchdown, so that hurt his fantasy value. I do think that Justin Herbert's been a pretty solid quarterback this year, though. He's also a top 10 quarterback, and I do think that going forward, he's definitely going to be better and better and better every week. I have him at number 5 for this week. Number 6, I have Kyler Murray, who is going up against the Rams, who is coming off of a pretty bad week last week, and I do think that might hurt him. He didn't look great in that loss against the Patriots, and I mean, Kyler Murray, I do think his shoulder injury might have an effect on how well he plays, and so I have Kyler Murray at number 6 this week. If he gets for a rushing touchdown or 2 instead of Kenyan Drake rushing for those touchdowns, then I do think that Kyler Murray could be in the top 5 for sure this week. At number 7 this week, I have Josh Allen, who's going up against the 49ers, and 49ers have a pretty tough defense. They've been getting healthier and healthier, and Richard Sherman's back now. So I do think that this is going to be a tougher matchup for Josh Allen, and that's why I moved him down quite a bit, because typically he's probably a top 5 quarterback every week or top 6. But right now I'm at 7. I think he's pretty solid next week, but if you have any of the quarterbacks above him, I would start them over him. But that's only because of matchup, I would say. And just Josh Allen hasn't been, if Diggs doesn't have a good day, then Josh Allen's not having a good day kind of thing. And so hopefully Diggs has a big day. At number 8, I have Taysom Hill at the Falcons. First time they played the Falcons, Taysom Hill ran for 2 touchdowns. And so, I mean, Taysom Hill is a pretty fantasy relevant quarterback, and I do think that this could be a really big week for Taysom Hill, even against an easier defense, even if he doesn't really throw the ball a whole lot. He might get rushing touchdowns, which hurts Alvin Kamara's stock. At number 9, I have Deshaun Watson versus the Colts. So Deshaun Watson just lost his best receiver in Will Fuller, and so I do think that's going to hurt him a lot this week, but I still think he's a top 10 quarterback play. And if you have Deshaun Watson, I think that you're pretty fine playing him against any defense. Colts are tough though, but I do think that with Duke Johnson on the backfield catching passes like last week, and I mean Brandon Cooks is still there, and then they have, Cobb's out and they dropped still, so I don't know what their other receivers are. Kiki Kuti, I think, is one of them, and then I don't know who their other outside receiver is going to be, but I do think that Deshaun Watson's still a top 10 quarterback because he can run for touchdowns or he can get yards on the ground. I think he's a pretty solid quarterback every week, even if his best weapon is gone. At number 10 this week, I have Ryan Tannehill versus the Browns. Browns secondary has not been very good this year. They will get Myles Garrett back, but I do think that Ryan Tannehill will still have a big week. He's my bold prediction. I like Ryan Tannehill this week against the Browns. At number 11, I have Ben Roethlisberger versus the Washington football team. I do think that the Washington football team has a really good secondary, and it's been proven that they do, but I still think that this is going to be a big week for Big Ben, and I think that he's got a pretty good opportunity to be a top 10 quarterback potentially this week, and if he doesn't get hurt today in the game or whatever, then I feel like he's going to be a pretty solid quarterback going forward. At number 12, I have Derek Carr at Jets. Jets are a horrible secondary, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and Derek Carr is coming off a really bad game, but I think that Derek Carr will bounce back this week and he'll have a pretty big game against the Jets because, obviously I do think that Josh Jacobs is going to have a big game because he's my bold prediction. That's if Josh Jacobs plays, obviously. But I have Derek Carr at 12, and I think it's a pretty safe play this week. I have him as a quarterback 1 this week. At number 13, I have Kirk Cousins versus the Jaguars. Kirk Cousins is coming off a really great game, and the Jaguars secondary has not been very good. They've been really bad against quarterbacks. Worst 5 defenses in the league against quarterbacks this year. And so I do think that Kirk Cousins could have a big week this week. But I have him at number 13. I would probably I just like the matchups a little bit higher, a little bit better than Kirk Cousins' matchup, even though it's a really good matchup for Kirk Cousins. I do like most of the matchups ahead of him better. At number 14, I have Cam Newton at Chargers. Chargers aren't great secondary, but they're not horrible. Josh Allen looked okay against them, but they had to run a couple of trick plays to throw over against them, and Josh Allen didn't really have like a phenomenal game or whatever, but it wasn't bad or by any means. And I think Cam Newton has been getting better pretty much every week. So, actually, he's coming off a really bad week, but I think other than last week, I think he's been pretty solid quarterback this year. So if you have Cam Newton, I think he's a pretty solid start this week against the Chargers. At number 15, I have Ryan Fitzpatrick versus the Bengals. I don't know if Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to play or not. It might be Tua, but I would probably just put Tua in 15 as well. Bengals are really bad secondary and against quarterbacks, and they're not getting a lot of pressure. Daniel Jones got hurt against them last week, but outside of that, Daniel Jones is playing pretty well. And then I think Ryan Fitzpatrick's just a really solid quarterback to play pretty much every week. And I have him at number 15 this week against the Bengals. At number 16, I have Matt Ryan versus the Saints. The first time they played the Saints, Matt Ryan looked really bad. And so I'm afraid that he's going to look that bad again. So I moved him down all the way to 16. Otherwise, he'd probably be in the top 12, top 10, maybe. I have Matt Ryan at 16 because I just don't know what their offense is going to be like this week. So I have him at number 16. At number 17, I have Jared Goff at Cardinals. Cardinals are not very good against quarterbacks this year. And they're really bad against wide receivers. So I think Jared Goff could have a really big game. And Cardinals are pretty solid against the run. They're not great, not horrible. I do think that Jared Goff could have a big game. And going off my bold prediction, if you haven't watched that video, go watch it and thumbs up. Jared Goff, I do think that he'll throw the ball a lot to Cooper Kupp. And the Cardinals' slot corner has not been very good this year. but Patrick Peterson is the outside corner, and he's been pretty solid this year, so expect him to go to Cooper Kupp more this week. At number 18, I have Baker Mayfield at Titans. At Titans. And so, I think Baker Mayfield's pretty solid, and as long as he's not in bad weather, I think Baker Mayfield is a pretty solid quarterback to start almost every week. And so I like Baker Mayfield this week. At number 19, I have Philip Rivers at Texans. Texans secondary has been horrible, and Philip Rivers has been playing pretty good the last couple weeks. And so I do think that this could be a really big week for Philip Rivers. I wouldn't be surprised if he could finish in the top 15 quarterbacks this week in fantasy. At number 20, I have Carson Wentz at the Packers. Packers have been pretty good against quarterbacks this year, and Carson Wentz, he threw 2 touchdowns late in the game, he threw one earlier in the game than one late in the game. I do think that Carson Wentz is a very volatile guy, and I do think that I don't know if I trust Carson Wentz completely. That's why I'm ranked at 20 this week in fantasy. All right, so for this week, we're going to be doing the running backs at 2 for week 13. Not this week, every week. So for my number one running back for week 13, I have Dalvin Cook versus the Jaguars. Jaguars have been horrible against the run, and they played last week against the Browns, and Nick Chubb just ran for 144 yards and a touchdown against them. So I do think Dalvin Cook could have a really big week. Hopefully he's fully healthy and doesn't get hurt. I think Dalvin Cook is a really solid play, but this might be last week that Dalvin Cook's running back 1 for me. Rest of season kind of rankings. Number 2, I have Derrick Henry versus the Browns. And Derrick Henry every week, no matter who he's going against, is a pretty solid play. Last week that was probably like his worst matchup of the season left. And so I do think that Derrick Henry is a very solid play going forward. And this week against the Browns, I don't think it's any different. We just saw James Robinson have a really good game against them. And so I do think that this could be a really big game for Derrick Henry. At number 3, I have Nick Chubb at the Titans. Titans are not very good against the run. And so I do think that Nick Chubb is going to have a big game. And he's rushed for over 100 yards every single game since he's come back from injury. And I wouldn't expect anything less from him this week going up against the Titans defense that isn't very good against the run. At number 4, I have Austin Ekeler versus the Patriots. Austin Ekeler has caught 11 passes 2 games this season. He's played 4 healthy games. So if that tells you anything, that's, in half PPR, that's 5.5 points, and full PPR, that's 11 points. That's free 11 or 5.5 points. Or in standard, that doesn't really count for anything, but he's still getting 80 yards. So that's 8 points right there. Or 8.5, or whatever you got. Austin Ekeler is a really solid player, and even against a tougher defense, they're not very good against the run, though. So I do think that this could be a really good game for Austin Ekeler, and he was barely outside the end zone, couple inches last week. And so I do think that this could be a really big week for Austin Ekeler in week 13, going up against the Patriots. Number 5, I have James Robinson at Vikings. James Robinson, he's pretty much just been matchup proof this year. Steelers he's run pretty well against. Last week against the Browns, who I thought were a pretty solid defense, he ran really well against. So I do think that playing against the Vikings, who are not as good against the run, I think that James Robinson could have a really big week this week. And so I have him at number 5. At number 6, I have Chris Carson versus the Giants. Chris Carson was pretty solid last week. He caught a couple passes, ran for a touchdown. He looked really healthy. And so I do think that Chris Carson in week 13 will have a really big week. I have him rated at number 6 this week. At number 7, I have Aaron Jones versus the Eagles. Eagles are a really tough defense, really good front, and so I do think this is going to be a really tough running game for Aaron Jones, but out of the backfield, Aaron Jones catches passes. So I do think this is going to be a really good receiving game for Aaron Jones, and I really like his matchup because they run a lot of man, and so that means that Aaron Jones is going to be one-on-one against most likely linebacker, and so I think Aaron Jones wins those matchups a lot. And so I do think that it's going to be a really good game for Aaron Jones this week. I have him at number 7. At number 8, I have Myles Sanders, who's going up against the Packers, which is funny because I had Aaron Jones at 7, Myles Sanders at 8. Packers' run defense has not been very good this year, and so I do think that Myles Sanders is going to have a really big game. We just saw David Montgomery have 9 carries for 108 yards and a touchdown. So I think this could be a really good game for Miles Sanders. I have a number 8. At number 9, I have Kareem Hunt at Titans. So when I was talking about Nick Chubb, I said the Titans are really bad against the run. And Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb pretty much split carries. I mean, they both get roughly 10 plus. And so I do think this could be a really big game for Kareem Hunt as well. And so I think they're kind of utilizing them in a double-headed backfield, and I think it's working really well for them. I mean, Nick Chubb looks great, and I think Kareem Hunt will look really good this week as well. At number 10, I have Josh Jacobs at the Jets. Josh Jacobs, in my bold prediction, I said that he would finish as the top-scoring running back, and I think that could happen, obviously. But as of right now, I rated him at 10 because I don't know if he's going to play or not, and so if he's a little banged up, that's obviously going to hurt his value a lot. So I think that having him at 10 is a fairly good spot, and I think if they get up in this game and he is playing, I think he's pretty much bound to get a couple touchdowns and maybe rush a lot. So I do think that Josh Jacobs is a really great play this week. At number 11, I have Alvin Kamara at Falcons. Falcons' run defense is actually pretty good, and the last time that they played the Saints, which was 2 weeks ago, I mean, Alvin Kamara didn't even catch a single pass. He had one target out of the backfield, and he didn't rush for a touchdown, and Taysom Hill ran for touchdowns. So I do think that really hurts Alvin Kamara, so I rated him down at 11. I think that Alvin Kamara is kind of getting it played out of this game because they might be up by a lot, and then they might give the ball to Latavius Murray, which they've been doing the last 2 weeks now. And so I think that Alvin Kamara has been a little bit played out of his role, which is kind of upsetting. At number 12, I have DeAndre Swift at Bears. Hopefully he plays. I mean, he's missed the last 2 weeks, so I don't really know what to expect. I think that DeAndre Swift's a really solid player, and he catches balls out of the backfield, and he's kind of been their lead back in the last couple weeks when he was playing before he got hurt. And Bears are going to be playing without Akeem Hicks, and Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams looked really good against the Bears last week running, so I do think that DeAndre Swift could have a really big game this week against the Bears. At number 13, I have David Montgomery versus the Lions. Dave Montgomery last week looked really good, and it was probably just because of that 51-yard run. But I do think he's playing against the worst run defense in the NFL against the Lions, and so I do think that Dave Montgomery will have another big week, and he's got a really easy rest of season schedule, so I do think that Dave Montgomery is pretty solid for the rest of season. I have him number 13 this week against the Lions. At number 14, I have Antonio Gibson at Steelers. Antonio Gibson, I mean, he's just been running back like 5 right now, or 4, and I think that he's been really solid. Antonio Gibson, for where you drafted him, he's been really solid. And I have him number 14 this week. I think the Steelers are a really tough run defense, so this could be a tough game for Antonio Gibson. But at the same time, you're pretty much not sitting Antonio Gibson no matter who he's playing against, even if he does have a tougher matchup against the Steelers. So I like Antonio Gibson this week. I have him at number 14. At number 15, I have Raheem Mostert versus the Bills. Raheem Mostert had a fumble last week. I mean, it was Aaron Donald tackling him, so it makes sense. But, I mean, outside of that, Raheem Mostert played pretty well. I mean, Rams are known as like one of the best run defenses, so I think that how Mostert played against them was very good to see, and it was his first game back, so that's wonderful to see. And I think that this is going to be a really good week for Raheem Mostert. I have it number 15 for week 13. For number 16, I have Ezekiel Elliot at Ravens. I think the Ravens are a really tough run defense. I just don't know if they'll evolve their defensive players back. And so I think Ezekiel Elliott will have a tough game, and he didn't look very good last week against Washington. So I don't know if Zeke is a really solid player this week, but I have him at number 16 anyways. I think you're pretty much going to start him because you draft him in the first round no matter what. And so I'm pretty sure you're going to start him no matter what. At number 17, I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus the Broncos. Broncos have a pretty tough run defense, but it's not like amazing or anything. And so I do think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have a pretty good game and he gets a lot of touches. So it could be a really good game for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I rate him down at 17 though because I just don't know what that offense is going to be like or what the Broncos offense is going to be like because it could be a really, really big week for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but it could be a pretty mediocre depending how well the Broncos play the Chiefs. At number 18, I have J.K. Dobbins versus the Cowboys. I don't even know if he's going to play yet. I know he had COVID. And so this is going to be a tough game for J.K. Dobbins to get back because I don't know what the protocol is for stuff like this because if he had it, he might still be sick, and so he might not play. But if he does play, I have him rated as 18th running back this week. And the Cowboys' run defense is awful. I mean, we saw Antonio Gibson have 3 rushing touchdowns last week, so I think J.K. Dobbins could do something close to that, and I like J.K. Dobbins this week. I have him at number 18. At number 19, I have Wayne Gallman at Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks pretty much shut down Miles Sanders last week, but Wayne Gallman has been scoring touchdowns like crazy, and so I think he's a really solid play if you need like a flex option or a running back too. I think that Wayne Gallman is a really solid running back to play. At number 20, I have Nyheim Hines at Texans. Texans are not very good against the run. Actually, like one of the worst. They're giving up the most yards rushing per game. But, I mean, Nyheim Hines is really good, and I think that he's a really solid player. And he gets a lot of passes out of the backfield. I mean, he led the team in catches last week with 8. And so I do think that Nyheim Hines going forward is a really solid player. At number 21, I have Kenyan Drake versus the Rams. Also with Nyheim Hines, I don't know what's going on with Jonathan Taylor, so that's going to hurt Jonathan Taylor's value as well. At number 21, I have Kenyan Drake versus the Rams. Rams have a really tough run defense, and Mostert looked pretty good against them last week, but he only averaged like 3.5 yards per carry. And Drake had 2 touchdowns last week, but typically Kyler Murray steals them away from him, so I do think that this is going to be a tougher game for Kenyan Drake this week. But I do think he's still a top running back. If you have him, I would play him in the flex or running back too. I think he's a pretty solid play this week. I have him at number 21. At number 22, I have Myles Gaskin versus the Bengals. I don't know if he's fully healthy or not, but if he is and he's activated off IR, I think he's a really solid play this week. I have him at number 22. I mean, we haven't seen him play for the last 4 weeks, so I do think that if he comes back and he's fully healthy, he's definitely a must-start this week against the Bengals. At number 23, I have Duke Johnson versus the Colts. Duke Johnson, I mean, the Colts' defense is very good, and Duke Johnson catches balls out of the backfield, which is a positive for him, but I do think it's pretty tough for him to be able to run on them, so I have him rated down all the way at 23. I mean, he's coming off a really good game. He caught a touchdown, so I think Duke Johnson's a pretty solid play, but this week I have him at number 23 going up against a tough run defense and pass-catching defense. At number 24, I have Melvin Gordon versus the Chiefs. And, I mean, Melvin Gordon's been really solid this year, except for last week, but I think he's definitely like a flex or running back 2 kind of play, and so I have him ranked 24th. I do think that it's going to be a tougher matchup versus the Chiefs because if they get too far behind, I don't know how much they're going to run the ball, but he is or has been their pass-catching back, and so I do think that Melvin Gordon might get some touches out of the backfield catching the ball. At number 25, I have Giovani Bernard at Dolphins. Dolphins are horrible against the run, but if the Dolphins get up in that game, then I think that Giovani Bernard kind of gets played out of the game. And maybe he catches passes out of the backfield, but last week they didn't really utilize him in that way. And they have a young quarterback, and so I do think that Giovani Bernard will kind of get played out of this game, but I have him at number 25 anyways. He's a flex option, running back 2. I think he's pretty solid. I mean, I like Giovani Bernard this week. I'm at number 25. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next video tomorrow. I'll be doing wide receiver and tight end rankings. Peace. Enjoy the game today.